We all know that family. Or maybe we grew up inside it. The family where one child's name appears in every sentence that starts with again. Again with this one. Again, this mess. Again, somehow, always this child. While a sibling sits nearby. Quiet, composed, practically perfect. In a way this child never seems to reach. From the outside, the conclusion feels obvious. This child has a problem. They're difficult. They're reactive. They can't seem to get it together. But family systems theory looks at that exact same picture and sees something entirely different. It sees a system working perfectly, in a way that no one inside it understands, and no one consciously chose. The child isn't the problem. The child is carrying the problem, on behalf of the entire system. And that distinction changes everything. In family psychology, we call this role the scapegoat. And that word didn't arrive by accident. In ancient ritual, a community would place its collective sins onto a single goat and drive it out into the wilderness. The village was cleansed. The goat carried everything away. In families, the mechanism is remarkably similar. The scapegoat child tends to follow a recognizable pattern. They are the first person blamed when something goes wrong. Their achievements get quietly minimized, while their mistakes get amplified far beyond proportion. When tension rises in the family, their presence, somehow, always becomes the subject. And slowly, over years, they begin to believe the story the family tells about them. But here's what we need to stop and actually examine. In nearly every family with a scapegoat child, there is another child who doesn't carry that role. Tatouage, usually what clinicians call the golden child, the one who can do no wrong, the one held up as the standard, the one the scapegoat is quietly, relentlessly measured against. These two roles don't exist independently of each other. They create each other. And when you understand that, you begin to understand that no one in this picture is purely the villain, and no one is purely the victim. Every person is playing a role the system assigned, without a single written word, without anyone's conscious consent. The most important question isn't, why is this child like this? The most important question is, what does the system need this role for? Salvador Minuchin, one of the founders of structural family therapy, spent decades observing families and identified a pattern that repeated itself across cultures, across income levels, across generations. When parents carry unresolved tension between them, a marriage that has gone cold, a grief that was never spoken, a conflict being carefully avoided, the family system tends to redirect that tension onto a child. Wait, not because the parents are cruel, but because this is how systems protect themselves. Think of it this way. When a couple has real distance between them, the kind that builds quietly over years, they need a shared focal point. The scapegoat child provides one. What did she do now? And suddenly, two people who couldn't find common ground have something to align around. Shared worry, shared frustration, shared disappointment. The distance temporarily disappears. Murray Bowen called this triangulation. When two people cannot manage the anxiety between them, they pull in a third person to stabilize the system. And the child most likely to be triangulated is rarely the most troublesome one. It's often the most sensitive one, the one who picks up on tension before it's named, the one whose nervous system was already tuned to the emotional frequency of the room. That child reacts, and their reaction gets labeled as the problem. A loop closes, and no one can see it from the inside. And what about the golden child? The perfect sibling on the other side of this equation? They carry a burden too. It's just invisible. They learned early that love has conditions, and the condition is never being wrong. They will carry that lesson into adult life and give it another name: perfectionism, performance anxiety, a bone-deep fear of failures. Two children, two different kinds of damage, one system, but we haven't reached the deepest layer yet. Because the parents in this story, they didn't start from nothing. Ask yourself, When your mother or father was a child, what role did they play in their family? Was one of them the one who could never do anything right? Or the opposite, the one who had to be perfect to earn love? Bowen described something he called multi-generational transmission, the idea that emotional patterns, relational habits, and family roles don't simply appear. They are handed down, from grandparents to parents, from parents to children, not usually through explicit instruction, but through atmosphere, through the way eyes move across a room, through what gets said and through what never does. The father who constantly criticizes his son may not realize that his own father did exactly the same to him, in the same tone, with the same words. The mother who compares her children may not remember that she spent her entire childhood in the shadow of a more favored sibling. This didn't start with you. It was given to you by people who didn't know they were giving it, and they received it from people who didn't know either. And the scapegoat child, in many families, isn't only carrying the tension of the present generation. Sometimes they're carrying something older. They may resemble a family member everyone has complicated feelings about. They may have been born at a moment of crisis, right after a death, right in the middle of a financial collapse, right when a marriage was fracturing. So what happens when someone in the system tries to change? When the scapegoat child grows up, after years of therapy, after years of painful self-awareness, and decides, I'm not playing this role anymore. I won't react. I won't absorb what isn't mine. What happens? The system pushes back. And it doesn't push back by saying, please continue being blamed. We need that from you. It pushes back in ways that are far more subtle and far more destabilizing. The family grows suddenly anxious when you seem too different. They say things like, you've really changed, and it doesn't sound like a compliment. They escalate the old behaviors, more blame, more comparison, as if trying to pull you back to the position you occupied before. Or, sometimes, they quietly begin redirecting the role onto someone else. Bowen called this homeostasis, the system's drive to return to its familiar equilibrium, however painful that equilibrium was. Because familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar change. The system doesn't resist change because it's malicious. It resists because it genuinely doesn't know how to function any other way yet. This is why people who begin genuine healing often face a disorienting paradox. The healthier they become psychologically, the more out of place they can feel in the family that raised them. Not because the family doesn't love them, but because the system hasn't yet learned how to love them differently. And this is where it needs to be said plainly. Changing a family system is possible, but it doesn't happen by one person changing and waiting for everyone else to follow. It requires patience, clear boundaries, and more often than not, support from outside the system itself. A therapist, a mentor, a community that knows you outside of your family role. You cannot heal inside the same environment that required you to be wounded in the first place. Not without help. We end with what I think matters most. If you're watching this and you recognize yourself in the scapegoat child, I want you to hear this. The story you were told about yourself, that you were the difficult one, the dramatic one, the one who always caused problems, that story is not the truth about who you are. It was a role the system needed filled. And having played that role does not mean you are that role. The work of your life is not to prove that story wrong. It's to stop organizing your life around it at all. If you're watching this and you recognize yourself as the parent who did the blaming, I want you to hear this. You are not a bad person. You were working from patterns you learned, in a system you didn't design, carrying weight that was placed on you before you had the language to name it. Recognizing this is not an excuse for harm, but it is the beginning of something that excuses never are. Real change. And if you're watching this and you recognize yourself as the golden child, the perfect sibling, I want you to hear this. The weight of perfection is no lighter than the weight of blame. It's just less visible, and you deserve to be released from it too. Minuchin once wrote that the family is the context in which human beings develop, and that when the context shifts, the person shifts with it. Your family is not your destiny. But to change it, you first have to see it. Really see it, not through the story you were handed, but through the clearer, harder, more compassionate lens of what the system actually needed and why. Samkon. This video is one step toward that kind of seeing. And once you've seen it, you won't be able to unsee it.